I am in my backyard this week. It's really hot, so hopefully I can get this project done very quickly. But I need to make a much larger pressing board. So you could call it an ironing board. I'm going to call it a pressing board because quilters press. And to do that, I need some space. I need more space than what I have in my studio. So I'm out here so I can have space. And I'm going based off of loosely the Jordan Fabrics video from several years ago that Matt Jordan put out about how he makes their pressing boards, ironing boards, whatever you want to call it. And I have some modifications, so I'm going to go into that. But it's pretty basic. I have the plywood right here, and this is plywood that I got from Home Depot. And price point on that was about 27 and change, like $27.50, something like that. And that is a 2 foot by 4 foot plywood piece. So no need to visit the cutter. And that's my first modification. And then for my other materials, I have this, which is actually backing fabric. And I'm doing that because for the extra that I need to loop over, it turns out that about 1 yard is perfect. So I have 1 yard of backing fabric. And then I was going to use the batting and double up the batting like what he does, but I found that I either had way too large batting that I didn't really want to break down and have weird little remnants, or I had batting that was way too small. Now, what I do have in great abundance that I don't really have a use for anymore is Insulbright. And so Insulbright, it's put out by the Warm Company. This is the little paper insert that comes with it, and it is designed for making basically thermally insulated type things like oven mitts and casserole carriers, hot pads, that kind of thing. I was making a lot of hot pads. I find that they don't really sell quite as well as I would hope, especially for the time that it takes to make them. And so I have a pretty good amount of one bolt, probably about half of one bolt, that's just been sitting in my closet with no use. So I thought, this would probably be great for the pressing mat, the pressing board, because doubling up the batting, I think, was partially to kind of make it so that maybe you don't scorch the wood or something. So I'm just going to use one layer of this. I think that will be great. And then Matt staples his stuff with a staple gun. I think we have a staple gun, but when I asked my husband, he had no idea where it was. I don't know where it is. So I went ahead and just got some upholstery nails. And so I'm going to use that, because it's the same kind of concept as if you're trying to reupholster a chair. So we're going to get started on this. All right, so I also need a hammer, and I also need a pair of scissors because I'm going to have to cut down the Insulbright and the backing a little bit so that everything fits. And I have no need for more than one of these, so we're going to assemble this thing together in real time here. So the very first step to this is to lay out whatever is going to be the surface of the pressing mat. So I have this. Yeah, there's going to be a lot that I cut off of this backing because backing is like 108, and I only need about 60. So the calculation here, it's 2 feet by 4 feet, so that's 24 inches by 48 inches, and then you're adding 6 inches around, which means that you're going to have 36 inches by 60 inches. So I just want to make sure that you weren't lost there wondering why I was cutting things so large. So you might be wondering why I'm making a pressing board, because if you have watched my videos, then you've probably seen that I use a wool mat. And the wool mat's great. I highly recommend them. However, when it comes to basting quilts, there is a particular way that I like to baste quilts where I'm actually fusing the layers together. And so for that particular style, I do find that that tiny little wool pressing mat just doesn't do it for me. And then I got a large pressing mat that wasn't officially a pressing mat, because you can go to Tractor Supply or some other kind of feed company type of chain, and they will have these things for horses that are horse pads, and it's made out of wool. It's basically the same thing as a pressing mat. So I have one of those, and it's a 3 foot by 3 foot. But I was finding with what I was doing recently, that was just shedding all over the place, and so that wasn't working for me either. So I didn't want to do that. So I'm going to layer my Insul Bright on top of my backing fabric here, and I need to try to get this thing unfurled, but try to get it matching up. Okay, so I seem to have this laid out. So now I'm going to place the big piece of plywood on top, and I don't have any kind of measuring tape or ruler, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, and I think that will be fine. So let me pull everything this way. So that looks like it needs to be a little bit more that way and that way. So I have to admit, like, I have no idea if the Insul Bright is going to be a good choice. Maybe it is. So an Insul Bright, if you can get it, because I used to get it at Joann's, Insul Bright is, uh, probably close to around the same price as batting. So if you're not one of those people who buys batting by the gigantic roll, then, and if you can find it, then it might be an economical way to go. So let's see. All right, so I don't have a whole lot. So I have my little backing piece right there, and then I've got my Insul Bright. I have scissors that are kind of crappy scissors because Insul Bright will absolutely dull cutting blades, and it dulls needles. You end up having to change the needle on the sewing machine a bit more often when you're doing Insul Bright projects. This is actually cutting a little easier than I anticipated, so I'm happy about that. All right, so now that I have that, I need to get, got a hammer drop on my foot. I need to get that dragged over, and then have all of this backing fabric that is gonna have to get cut off as well. Okay, so, oh, okay, interesting. Okay, I mean, that's kind of about right. I don't know. Okay. I thought I measured the Insul Bright down to what I needed, but it looks like I have a little extra. So I'm gonna just put that over a little bit. Okay, yeah, sure. All right, so if I can get this over just a little bit, I'm just gonna cut the Insul Bright back just a little bit here. And then I need to cut the backing. I'm just gonna make a little bit of a snip. And then instead of using terrible scissors, I can just tear this. And then I will have this very quickly off of there. Okay. And just like that, I got that torn off. All right, I feel like I'm moving along pretty well. Okay, so next up, I'm going to try to get this kind of centered and just make sure that I am happy with my clearance going around. I think I will just a little tiny bit that way. That, okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And I think I can position just slightly this way. Okay, all right. So now I am ready to get hammering away on these tacks. So these are upholstery tacks. They didn't tell me how long that little shank was on them. So looking at this, if I didn't have this padding, then there'd be the risk that it might poke out just ever so slightly. from the wood, but since I have the padding, I should be pretty good. And so just like if you've ever done any upholstering of a bench, a chair, seat, something like that, you always start from the middle. So, and then you pull it tight, and then I'm just going to position that tack there, and hopefully I'm not going to, you know what, I'm going to get pliers. I'm going to get needle nose pliers. I got some needle nose pliers. I think that's a good idea, so I do not have a moment on camera where I smash my fingers. I think that would not be pleasant. So I'm just going to hold hold the tack in place with the needle nose pliers so I can get that started. Ah, perfect. Okay, good. So now it's just getting a whole bunch of these things tacked into place. And basically, whenever you're making something like this, upholstery or pressing board in this case, you want to work your way outward. And you know what? There's actually an important part that I skipped that I'm remembering now from Matt's video. So I'm going to do that right now before I get too into the weeds with these tacks. And that is that Matt was saying to notch these things at the corners. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So there we go. So notch there, and then let's get all these others notched out. And I think he went right into the corner, and it did end up folding over nicely for him, but I feel like that's maybe not going to work as well for me, so I'm just kind of doing my own little thing here. So I'm going to go over, I don't know, about 4 inches maybe. Okay. Oh, shoot. And that tack is a goner. All right, take 2. That's that one. Okay. There we go. All right, so this is going to be a lot of tacking going on here. I'm going to do a second one this direction, and then I'm going to start working the opposite direction. So on this side here, I want to leave enough space so I don't accidentally, so it looks like I can do something around here. Okay, I got him to work. All right, so we have that, and then I think we can get 2 on this side. Good, so, yeah. All right, so I need to look at this one, and I think that I'm just going to let that be. Okay, so I'm not going to do the sides yet because I need to do the opposite side. So let's see if I can keep myself in view here. All right, and then I want to just kind of push on that, make sure that's nice and pushed over, and then there we go. So that's looking good. All right, and then I'm going to go for about that kind of rough center mark, and I'm really, really pulling on this fabric. Not as important to pull on the Insulbright because that can have a certain amount of poof, but the fabric needs to be really nice and taut. Okay, and if I can get my tack, all right, get that really there. So obviously, if you have a staple gun, this is probably a little bit easier. I bet that's why Matt's always doing a staple gun with his. So just like before, I am going to start going to one side and then flip to the other side. So I have some definite modifications here from the way he does it. And it's not to take away from what he does. What he does is excellent. And if you haven't ever watched that video and you're interested in making your own pressing board, then I highly recommend it. Okay, but he starts off with a 4 foot by 8 foot piece of plywood. So he has the guy cut it down there on site at the Home Depot for 30 inches. So he's basically 30 inches wide by 4 feet long. And he has three of those. The table I use, the work table I use downstairs, is 30 inches. So it's already the same width as my table, and I didn't really want something that wide. I have a cutting mat that is 24 by 36, and it works really nicely on the table. Now, obviously, this is 4 feet, and I do like the concept of this being 4 feet because that way, whenever I'm basting a quilt or whenever I am pressing large pieces of yardage that I have either dyed, as is going to be the case for me, what really motivated me to try to get this done, but also what's motivated me is the basting of quilts. But also pre-wash yardage, I find to be particularly tedious trying to press that on my little 16 by 24 wool mat. So, and to get a wool mat that is big enough is pretty expensive. And then, kind of another benefit of this is wool mats always kind of like, will kind of bend and bow. And nice thing about this could potentially, when I'm not using it, be an additional, could be like an additional design board if I wanted. So it's gonna be kind of a strange design board because of this lava lamp fabric that I picked for the top of it, just because I wanted to have something kind of fun and festive. But let's see, I think I can fit one more right there. But that's basically my motivation right there. Now, Matt is working off of these tables that I think, quite frankly, are like the size of like queen size beds or something. They have some custom work tables there that are pretty large, and they have a whole bunch of work tables. And so I can understand the concept of him making three at a time. But for my needs as somebody doing this at home, I don't need that much. So I think a 2 foot by 4 foot works great. It's also not as expensive. This barely fit in my car with the seat down. So, I mean, I could fit 30 inches, but then I wouldn't have been able to have anybody else sitting in the back seat. And for the day that I bought this, there was going to be somebody sitting in the back seat. So that was not going to be good. I would have to go home if I did it in the mat kind of way. So now I think I can go ahead and get these ends. And so I just want to go ahead and get this. And again, I'm trying to have that be as pulled tight as possible. And, oh, okay. We just grabbed a bunch of tacks. All right. So I'm going to pull that nice and tight. And I also want to make sure that the Insel Bright is there because this is kind of poking outside of the Insel Bright. So I'm going to do that. And I think that's good. There we go. Good. All right. So since this is a shorter side, I'm just going to do one that side, one that side. I'm just going to alternate until I have all of these tacked in. All right. Let's see. What do you think? I could maybe fold it like that. Okay, but I need to do the other side, so getting ahead of myself. I've actually been wanting to make one of these for a very long time, but I got the wool mat, and I try to be really practical. If I don't actually have to make something, have to have something large and extra, then I don't do it. Okay, so I'm just going to tuck that in. I think that will work. So that's going to end up being a lot of layers. Ooh, there we go. Ooh, that's nice. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm just kind of looking at it, and I'm just kind of trying to tuck it in a bit and still keeping it kind of towards the outside, but kind of tucking it in. And then I'm just kind of feeling around for the Insel Bright since I can't see it anymore. I'm going to feel around for it. And then just going to get that tack right on there. Okay. And then I think these two tacks will finish out this side very nicely. I am really liking how this is coming along. Let me steal a peek here. Ooh, that's nice. Okay. All right, so now I have it on the other side. Just getting that nice and tightened up. And now I need to open my second package. Thank heavens I bought two packages. So I was thinking ahead about that. And honestly, like what I'm seeing here is probably closer to about 5 inches spacing I have. So I'm probably just going to end up putting some extra tacks in here, just like very similar to how Matt is doing the extra staples along just to reinforce it. The nice thing here is I have the selvage. The selvage is really tough because when this was milled, that would have actually been kind of nailed into place, so to speak, at least from what I've seen of milling footage on the internet. So, all right, so we're gonna get that nice and taut. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that little tuck under. And now I'm just doing some finishing up here to get that overlapping. I think that looks pretty good. See what the whole thing looks like. Ooh, very nice. All right, so that is a nice pressing mat here. This feels like it's got some nice give to it. I'll see if the Insulbright was a good choice. If it's not, then no biggie. I can just remove these tacks and redo it. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the rest of these tacks just because I don't really have a need for a bunch of upholstery tacks. So here's the back side, and here's the front side. So it looks pretty good. I do have that little seam there from the factory process. And then I got a little bit of a crinkle there. Not really anything I'm concerned about because when I'm pressing on this thing, all of that stuff is going to smooth out. It does have a nice kind of feeling of some padding, but pretty firm. So I think that could end up being really favorable for pressing. And I'm going to try this out and let you know. And until next time, happy sewing.